I haven't told many people this story. Not because I don't want to. But because every time I try, I get about 2 minutes in and I can see it on their face. That look. The one that says they're being polite but they've already stopped believing me. So I stopped trying. But I need to get this out somewhere, so here it is. Last October. Lost my job 2 months prior, and I was in that headspace where you either fall apart completely or you get in your car and drive. I chose to drive. No real plan. Just moving. I'd been staying mostly in motels, but I was burning through money faster than I expected. A friend told me about this app where you could find cheap or even free overnight stays at unusual locations. Converted churches. Old farmhouses, decommissioned lighthouses. That kind of thing. I downloaded it without thinking much of it. That's how I found the Hargrove. The listing called it a historic lodging experience. The photos showed high ceilings, ornate wallpaper, dark wood paneling. It looked like something out of a different century. Which honestly appealed to me. One night for $32. The reviews were sparse. Only 3 of them. 2 were vague and positive. The third just said, "Don't stay in room 9," with no further explanation. The Hargrove was about 40 minutes off the main highway, down a 2-lane road that my GPS kept trying to reroute me off of. I should have taken that as a sign. By the time I pulled into the gravel lot, it was just past 9 at night. The building was 4 stories, dark brick, with most of the windows unlit. There was a single lamp on above the front entrance. The sign above the door was old enough that half the letters had faded. A man in his 60s met me at the front desk. He was polite but quiet. Gave me a key attached to a wooden tag, told me breakfast was at 8, and reminded me that the elevator hadn't worked since 2011, so I'd need to take the stairs. I asked him how many other guests were staying that night. He paused just slightly too long before saying 2 others. I didn't press it. My room was on the 3rd floor. Room 14. I remember being relieved it wasn't room 9. The hallway on the 3rd floor was long and narrow with carpet that had probably been red at some point but had faded to something closer to the color of dried mud. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. Most of them flickered. My room was at the very end of the hall. Inside, the room was actually nicer than I expected. Clean enough. A queen bed, an old wooden dresser, a window that looked out over the back of the property. I could see a courtyard below, overgrown with weeds, and past that, a tree line. I unpacked just enough to get comfortable, brushed my teeth, and got into bed around 10:30. I was exhausted from driving. I was asleep within minutes. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. There was no dramatic noise. No crash, no scream. I just opened my eyes. Stared at the ceiling. Completely awake in the way you sometimes get in an unfamiliar place where your brain never fully lets go. I lay there for a few minutes. That's when I noticed it. A smell. Faint at first. Something damp and old, like a basement that had flooded years ago and never fully dried out. I assumed it was just the building. Old hotels smell like things. I rolled over and tried to go back to sleep. Then I heard the footsteps. They were coming from directly above me. Slow, deliberate, and heavy. One step. Then a pause. Then another. I counted them without meaning to. They crossed the room above me from one side to the other, stopped, and then started again in the opposite direction. Back and forth. Back and forth. I told myself it was another guest. Couldn't sleep. Pacing. Normal. But I was on the 3rd floor. The 4th floor, according to the man at the desk, was closed for renovation and had been for 2 years. I sat up in bed. The footsteps stopped the second I moved. I froze. The silence was so complete it almost had a texture to it. I waited maybe 2 full minutes without moving. Nothing. I exhaled, told myself it was old pipes or the building settling, and lay back down. That's when I heard the door. Not my door. The door across the hall. I heard it open slowly, the old hinges giving a low groan. Then I heard it close. Then nothing. I pulled out my phone. It was 2:14 in the morning. I told myself again. Other guests. Normal sounds. Go to sleep. I didn't sleep. Around 3 a.m. I got up to use the bathroom. On my way back to bed, I passed the window and looked out at the courtyard below almost without thinking. I stopped. There was a light on in the building across the courtyard. I hadn't noticed a separate structure out there when I arrived, but in the dark I could now see the outline of what looked like a smaller building connected to the main hotel by a covered walkway. One window was lit from inside. And standing in that window, perfectly still, was a figure. I couldn't make out any features from that distance. But whoever it was, they were facing my direction. Just standing there. Not moving. I stepped back from the window. My heart was going. I told myself it was another guest who couldn't sleep. Or a staff member. Someone doing something completely ordinary in the middle of the night in an unlit building across a dead courtyard at 3 in the morning. I closed the curtains and got back into bed. I did not sleep again. When the sun came up, I felt almost embarrassed by how scared I'd been. Everything looks different in daylight. I got dressed and headed down for breakfast. The man from the front desk was the only one there. I asked him about the other building across the courtyard. He looked at me for a moment. He told me that building had been locked up for over 15 years. It was the original section of the hotel, predating the main structure. A fire in one of the rooms had killed a guest back in the late 80s. After that, ownership had sealed the whole wing off and never reopened it. I asked him if there was any chance a staff member had been in there last night. He said no. Absolutely not. Nobody goes in there. I didn't tell him what I saw. I just nodded and drank my coffee. But here's the part that I can't shake. The part that keeps me up when I think about it too long. When I went back upstairs to pack my bag and check out, I walked down that long faded hallway one last time. And I stopped. The door directly across from mine was open. Just slightly. Maybe 4 inches. I had not seen that door open at any point the night before. The wooden tag hanging from the handle was still attached. I could see the room number on it. Room 9. I don't know what was in that building across the courtyard. I don't know who was pacing on that 4th floor or who opened the door across the hall at 2 in the morning. I don't know if the figure in the window was a person or something I can't explain. What I do know is this. Before I left, I stood in that hallway and I looked through that 4-inch gap into room 9. I couldn't see much. Just darkness and the edge of the dresser. But on the floor, just visible through the gap, were 2 things that I wish I had never seen. A single cigarette, still smoking. And a set of fresh muddy footprints leading toward the door. I got out of there. And I am never going back.